Hello. Welcome, everybody. I think we're just letting folks in from the waiting room. Hey, Moses. Hey, David. Hi, Peter. Nice to see you. Hey, Stephanie. Oh, good. Here comes Brad and Whitney. Hello. So we will get started with all of our noon events. We are very accustomed to a couple of things, one of which is that people often trickle in because they're coming from other meetings or getting lunch. And the other thing is that people are often eating, and that is wonderful. Eat on or off camera. It's all good with us. So I would love to welcome everyone to SVP Seattle's Advocacy Affinity Group. It's a monthly space where we work on co-creating our brand new advocacy program that's part of the SVP reimagining. So we will do a brief icebreaker. If everyone would share their name and pronouns, and let's go with our favorite kind of pie that is on my brain this week in the chat. And we will get started because we have a few guests with us that are going to be sharing legislative priorities is the focus for today's conversation. Yes, Stephanie, enjoy your lunch. Awesome. So we have three speakers with us today, and each of them are connected to SVP and in at least a couple of ways, and I'll get to that when I introduce each of them. Oh, pecan pie, love it, love it. That's my favorite. So first off, so we're going to be hearing from David from Schools Out Washington, Hannah from the Children's Alliance, and Moses from Open Doors for Multicultural Families. We've still got a few folks coming in. So without further ado, while people are putting their name, pronouns, favorite pie, pumpkin, excellent, in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, David, who is the Policy and Advocacy Director with Schools Out Washington. And what we've asked folks to share is a little bit about the organization, because I doubt there's any one of us who knows everything about the organizations that are represented here today. So a little bit of background about who you are and your organization, and then take about 5-10 minutes to share your upcoming Washington State Legislature priorities. So David, I'll turn it over to you and give you a spotlight here.
Great. Good afternoon. It's technically afternoon now. David Heeham with Schools Out Washington, and I have a presentation. I don't know if we can share it.
Yep, we're working on that. We'll get you a screen share.
Perfect.
And Tara, if you can also give screen share to Hannah and Moses. No idea if you've got slides or not, but if you do, there you go. You can.
And I went, when I was sort of presenting in the summer, I went over some of this. So I'll speed through some of it, but happy to answer any questions folks have. I want to make sure I'm not totally repeating myself, and I can't exactly remember what I covered in the summer. So, Schools Out Washington is a statewide intermediary that supports expanded learning opportunities with racial equity underpinning our work. And we do three main things: quality improvement, professional development, and that's most of what we do, help programs be their best for kids. Grant management, we do grant manage some funds. And then advocacy and systems building, and that's where I come in. And I'm also a part of this coalition, and I facilitate the coalition, much like Hannah does with ELA. And we're the Youth Development Strategy Table, ydstrategy.org. We started in 2019 to really bring the expanded learning, mentoring, and school-based wraparound sectors together in advocacy at the state level. And you can also find programs at Elevate Washington, which if you go to elevatewashington.org, you can find all kinds of youth development programs all around the state. Not going to say every program's on there, but I will tell you we have over 1,000 programs in King County and Pierce County in particular are pretty well covered. But of course, there's always programs starting every year, so we definitely don't necessarily have everyone. We have a lot of them. So the youth development strategy table has been successful in the last few years as really the pandemic, if there's anything good to say about it, is that the youth development sector really got seen for the first time. Schools shut down and our programs were still open, delivering services and supports in person and virtually. And you can see in the legislature also saw this, and we were able to get some wins, big and small, over the course of the pandemic. But the last one that I'll focus on is the one at the very bottom, which is a youth development work group that was created through Budget Proviso. Oh, and I was going to put the link in the chat. I'll put it in afterwards because the report is finally out. Really what we were tasked to do was to come up with some recommendations for the youth development sector, because right now there is no state agency with any purview over the field. There's no real funding. There's some little drips and drabs here and there. And then there's school-age childcare. So there is the childcare side of the field, but there really isn't much. And so we were tasked with sort of recommending to the state what all this should look like. And we were able to also do surveys and focus groups with providers and youth that were paid, and got a lot of uptake. In fact, I thought the number was at 200, and I saw the exact number. It was actually almost 300 youth that were surveyed in focus groups, which, you know anything about these kind of surveys and stuff, that's a pretty high number. And so I'm really excited to see that we had almost 500 people participate around the state. So what we saw, and I think I talked about this last time, so I won't go too much into it, but what are the strengths of the field and what are the challenges? And some of the top strengths are that youth voice and choice, really, particularly for teenagers, really comes into our sector. And one of our strengths is more and more programs lean into that. And then whole day, whole year support. So I think, commonly it's expected that the school is going to sort of meet all the needs of kids. And not only, I think everybody in this call knows that is true, but schools weren't built that way. And I don't think you can also expect one space to totally support every need of anyone, of all individuals in that space. So we were really there to be that support. And I hate to say this, but you think of schools as the box. We are the box. We are outside of the box, and also helping kids that don't necessarily feel comfortable in school or just not going to excel in a school-based setting, that we can help support them in other ways. And funding, school partnerships, and transportations were by far the biggest issues facing providers. So what are we, and youth? I mean, youth. So the youth side of that is, if anything costs, I'm not going to be able to do it, or I only have, so much money a year to be able to be in a program, or I can't get there. And while that is certainly a rural issue, that's even true even in urban and suburban areas where, yes, maybe there's transportation, but is it safe, and is it reliable? And if you live in certain parts of Kent and Auburn, there actually isn't a bus. I mean, you have to walk, a mile to get to the bus, which again may not be safe, or maybe cold or rainy. So what are we doing this session? What are we doing about it? And these were based on the recommendations that came out of that report. So we're basically just taking the recommendations and running with them this session to some extent. So I'm going to start with the bottom, which is a grant program for youth development. And I'll start out by saying this is a high number and a stretch goal for sure, but we really want to, honor what was in the report. And 25 million a year, which might sound like a lot of money, really doesn't go that far statewide. And so we still see this as sort of a state share of investment. We are not coming here expecting the state to fully fund youth development, but we do think that there's a share that they should be putting in, because the feds kick in a little, some local governments kick in, some programs fundraise, or youth are paying themselves or their families. So we think this is the state share. We want to prioritize youth furthest from educational justice. It will be a competitive grant program, but we are pushing for 2-year grants to just cut down on the number of grant cycles that providers have to work with. I'll also say, we're actually crafting the bill as we speak. And, in the bill, we also want to make sure that small programs have equitable access, meaning they have supports to apply, the application is low barrier, that there might even be kind of either a priority or at least, maybe another way of applying for funds if you're a smaller program. So we're taking and BIPOC-led organizations are taking an eye at that. But we don't want to leave out the big providers because they are serving so many kids, and in some places they're the only provider. So like in Moses Lake, pretty much it's Boys and Girls Club, and maybe one other small program, and that's it. So we want to support the full sector. On the state agency home side, it looks like we're looking at the Department of Commerce, and that might sound odd, but the reason for that is Commerce already has the Office of Homeless Youth. They also had a grant program during COVID, and they are a great agency to kind of be an incubator. While this youth development home might move somewhere else in the future, we really think that Commerce, to at least start, would be a great place to be. We're having conversations with them and legislators about that, and where we're zeroing in on now. And really, they'll be helping, with statewide challenges and help create a statewide vision, and hopefully a funding stream that, as we move along, that is more and more equitable and youth co-designed, and all those things that we would like to see eventually, that they can help staff and support. Funding for Elevate Washington, to help keep that program locator going, and kind of a state share of that as well. And then support for a Youth Development Advisory Council made up of youth providers and others, to help devise that vision and really support the work of the agency. We don't want this to be a random grant program that a 0.3 FTE is working on, but we also don't want to see a hugely regulated field with a ton of licensing and a ton of wax, because that's not our field. Our field is supposed to, again, be that outside of the box, dynamic youth voice, nimble, able to change with the times. And we want a state agency that's going to support that and do that with external partners. So I'll pause there before what's going to happen now to ask what questions folks have about this ask, or anything else about the youth development field that you've been dying to know.
Hey, David, it's Stephanie Charrington. I was just wondering if you have, thinking about, I love hearing that you're, of course, compensating youth for participating. I'm wondering if you've got a policy, just some guidelines around that. We have one here at Eastside Pathways, just for some, I mean, it's great that we're different, but just also some continuity too, in the region. And then I was curious about the council that you have here. Is that a statewide council, the Youth Council, Advisory Council, that youth are participating? So you're pulling youth from around the state?
Yeah, well, so the first piece, since this was a state, it was run by the state DCYF, and so I don't know if they had guidelines about how they were going to pay youth. But we did end up paying $125 for the focus groups. And then I don't remember what the survey was, but it was a fairly good denomination. And I know the state is devising in fact, I've seen that policy that they are devising now around anybody with lived experience, and because they passed the bill last year around that. So the state will have a pretty formal process for that. For the schools at Washington, we don't, but we are actually, and anybody that's interested, I pulled together some folks, various coalitions. And Hannah, I figured maybe youth voice wasn't so possible in early learning, although I would love to have you. But also how all these different coalitions working with youth in a more meaningful and structured way as we create policy priorities. And so like the WACHA, the Homeless Alliance, QUAC, Child Welfare, Black Joy Consortium, all these different coalitions, we're going to kind of put our brains together next Monday, 2 Mondays from now. So if anybody's interested in that, let me know and I can add you to that. For this Youth Development Advisory Council, that's something we're hoping to create. And so and I know there are other things like it, even in state government. I'll be frank, we're getting a little bit of pushback about advisory councils from the state. And I think part of it is the amount of energy that these take, and money and time if you're going to do it well, especially if you're working with youth, because quite frankly, it becomes a program. It's not just it's not like adults where you go to this council or board and you sit there and you might do a little bit outside and then you go and leave. When you're a youth, you're really having to support the youth to be a part of that, which makes it a program. And then we have the other issue of how do you not just get youth that are sort of high flyers, already super involved, is that really who I don't say we don't want to hear from them, but how are we reaching other youth? So I say all that to say we're still trying to figure out how this council could work, if it will even happen, and if it doesn't happen in policy, how do we get youth voice into this state agency? So that's kind of where things are at with that right now. Would love thoughts and or anybody that's done work like this would love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, now we are working with legislators. Like I said, we're working on a bill draft right now. I'm hoping to pre-file that, which means it'll be out in December for folks to weigh in on. And one thing I'm clear is like that's obviously the end of the process. She'll be working on all through sessions. So as people start seeing that, and if you have questions or want to see changes or want to talk about stuff, let's talk. We have hosted 3 in-person meetings, and we have 3 more coming up, as well as getting virtual feedback on this bill. So we're pulling all of that input in and trying to figure out where that lives inside the bill and the eventual budget request. And then our Advocacy Week in Olympia will be February 6th through 10th. We'd love to have you join us. Most of that will be virtual as much as we can, including meetings with legislators. Some legislators will be meeting virtually this year. And so even if you can't come to Olympia, but you want to advocate on this, we'd love to have you. I will send this so you all have it, but my email is dbeard@schools.washington.org. And if you're interested in participating, please do, either in the coalition or in our process to get this bill passed. So thank you for having me today and letting me speak on this important issue.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, David, and thanks to Schools Out Washington for being here. Yeah, Emiko.
Yeah, David, can I ask a question? Can anyone attend the trainings or the advocacy day?
Absolutely. So, and actually that's a good question because yes, you can. Also, anyone can sign up for YDST, the coalition. You don't need to be, you can sign up as an individual or an organization. And our training. So we have 301 coming up next month, which is a real deep dive into advocacy. It's like, it's not 101. It's like, you want to know how this stuff, what happens behind the curtain. And then 101 we'll have again, and the youth advocacy training we'll have again in January. And then I have a 201, which is around local and school district funding. And I just did that last week, but we'll do that again in the future. And anyone's welcome to join those as well. They're free.
Great, even if I don't have experience in education.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you don't
Great.
need to,
Okay.
because most youth development folks, I mean, I guess in the broad sense of education, but they don't have like necessarily K-12 experience.
Great. Well, we'll make sure to get that out and sign up.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. And I left an important part of David's bio out. David is a brand new this year SVP partner. So really happy to have you as part of the partnership, David. Thank you for all the great work you're doing at Schools Out Washington. And thanks for sharing with us. And we'll definitely look to get that deck and those invitations out to our larger community. Next, we have another very special person to SVP, Hannah Gregory. Hannah, hello. Hannah and I had a chance to work together for 2 years. Hannah is an SVP staff alum. She was program director with us, and she is now the director of ELA with Children's Alliance. Hannah, I'll put the spotlight on you. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I was also told, because I'm here, that Brindle needs to be here. So he's here. Oh, well, he's here doing something. He didn't like being not under the blanket, apparently. But thank you all for having me. My name's Hannah Gregory. I am the Early Learning Action Alliance Coalition Director for Children's Alliance, which is a lot to say in one go. But today I'm here to really share around ELA's priorities. Children's Alliance is still in the process of developing their priorities. And so, and just a little bit of background. So Children's Alliance is a statewide advocacy organization that advocates with children and families to ensure better thriving society for them, but really focusing on children's issues like health, dental health, and early learning. And my role is to convene and lead the early learning part of Children's Alliance. So I work with a coalition of about 60 early learning organizations to develop a statewide advocacy priority agenda, and then we move from there with each other throughout session. Um, so I don't have a fancy PowerPoint like David does, but I will walk through our priorities. And they are, just to let you all know, they're pretty broad right now, just because we are waiting on some numbers from folks, different folks from within the coalition that are working specifically on each of the items, and then also for our agenda to reflect what the governor is going to put in his decision, his budget in the next few weeks. Well, more like in a month or so. So our priorities are a little bit more broad, and then once we get a little bit more direction from the governor's budget, we'll be being more specific on that end. So for ELAW, we're really looking at addressing the workforce crisis that is happening. I mean, I think we all understand that through the pandemic, in all sectors, workforce has been impacted, and especially the childcare workforce and early learning workforce. And if you can't get kiddos in to childcare, then it's really hard for folks to go back to work. So we're making the case for a long-term investment and then a shorter-term investment for addressing workforce issues in different sectors of the early learning spectrum. So for instance, there's a cost of care study that's being done that has been done through Commerce around childcare, and then Home Visiting is also doing their own cost of care study along with ECAP, the state-funded preschool program. And so once those numbers come out, we'll have a very specific ask. We're also working with Childcare Aware very closely with their liberatory design process to support the legislation that will come out of that. And that process is really taking about 25 to 30 childcare providers from within Washington state and really asking them and having them be the center of the policy making around compensation. What are they looking for? What would they like to see? What does compensation mean to them? And this group has been primarily led through the leadership of Childcare Aware of Washington, with a lot of the different stakeholders from ELAW really helping in guiding, but leaving the decision making up to those childcare providers. So it's a really great way that we're trying to recenter folks with lived experience. Another piece of what we're advocating for is around the implementation of Fair Start for Kids. Fair Start for Kids Act was passed in 2021. It put about $1 billion into the childcare and early learning sector, and now the implementation of it is really key. So we're looking at things like raising the subsidy rate for childcare, so Working Connections Childcare, bringing that subsidy rate up to the 85th percentile of the market rate, and then also opening up eligibility, ensuring that more families have access to affordable childcare. Those things, and then we're also looking at increasing investments to infant mental health consultation and the complex needs grants for both ECAP and childcare. I think it's around 40 million for those. And then of course, we're highly invested in progressive revenue because Fair Start for Kids Act was passed on sort of the understanding that if capital gains was passed, then that would be the main funding entity for implementing Fair Start for Kids and childcare. And so that being sort of contested, we'll be hearing more about the Supreme Court. We'll have a hearing on January 26th. And so we should know more about the capital gains tax, and we're still pushing for progressive revenue because we need sustainable funding for all of these different programs. On top of that, Stefan wanted me to let you all know that Children's Alliance is continuing to support efforts around oral health, mainly around dental therapy expansion, and then also responding to mental health, the mental health crisis, not just with early learning, but also in the K-12 sector as well. And then of course, capital gains. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I'll go. Oh, somebody else had a question and they should go first.
Sorry, Emiko, this is Moses at Open Doors. Hannah, thank you for that great information. At Open Doors, we serve we're located in South King County in Kent, and it's a very diverse city. Of course, Kent always ranks in the top 10 in the United States, being most diverse. And one of the kind of top issues, I would say probably definitely in the top 5 issues for the families we serve, specifically a lot of the mothers that I've talked to, they struggle in finding daycare that one that is culturally and linguistically available or accessible. But even they tell me we can get over that, Moses, but the problem is they turn us away because our kids have IDD. And so I'm just wondering, like in this plan of expanding more daycare options for parents in Washington State, if in this in your strategy, you guys have looked at that and increasing more options for parents with children with developmental or intellectual disabilities.
Yeah, that's a great question. And definitely, I mean, that's part of the expansion of the infant mental health consultation. Last year, I think we were able to expand to get, I think, 3 or 4 more mental health consultants, and they were from different backgrounds and culturally relevant backgrounds that represent Washington State. So someone who speaks Somali, someone who speaks Spanish, and there are 2 other ones. I think they might have been tribal as well. So really thinking about that in the rollout of Fair Start for Kids and getting more folks to be able to be eligible and then accessing the subsidy as well. And then for the complex needs grants, ECAP and childcare have 2 different buckets, but those funds really, once they're deployed to those programs, folks can use them in any way that they see fit. So they can use it to hire staff, or they can use it to really support sort of more folks with developmental disabilities and addressing those. If you'd like, one of our coalition partners is Arc of King County, and you probably all work with them. If you want, I can also connect you with them, and they have a lot of they have their own agenda, and they do a lot of great work in the space as well. Yeah.
Well, Hannah, thanks so much for presenting. I was wondering if you could talk more about, you mentioned that Fair Start for Kids was predicated, the funding for that on the capital gains tax. I wonder if you could talk more about that and any work you might be doing on the capital gains right now, or other revenue sources.
Yeah, so basically when Fair Start for Kids was passed, we were using to fund Fair Start for Kids. We were using sort of ARPA funds, so federal funding that we are getting through COVID relief, and that was only supposed to be a holdover until capital gains is passed, and then capital gains is passed, and then in the Douglas County Court, it was appealed, and so now we're to the Washington Supreme Court to hear it. What Children's Alliance has been doing alongside a lot of other organizations working on progressive revenue is we're part of another coalition called Balance Our Tax Code, and they have been helping a lot. And I think Stefan is helping write an amicus brief at this moment. And so so he's working on that side of things. And then once we get more information, I'll be able to share that out with you. I'm not deeply involved in that, other than we definitely strongly advocate for progressive revenue.
Outstanding. Other questions for Hannah?
Well, I always have that outstanding question. Hannah, you know SVP. What could SVP do to support this legislative work?
Yeah, so Children's Alliance is going to have an advocacy day. It will be, I think it's that same week, David. So there will be lots of opportunities. We're not having a whole week, though. We'll have a day. So there will be lots of opportunities for folks to come and plug in. We're doing a little bit of the same thing of really being able to educate folks on sort of Legislature 101, how a bill becomes a law, matching you with your legislators, to really build connections and to talk about the different issues that are impacting you and your communities, and hopefully those align with our issues as well. And so those are a few other ways. We do have a membership of over 6,000 folks across the state. So becoming a Children's Alliance member or receiving our newsletter can help you keep up with all the great work that we're doing. And basically, ELAW, it's a coalition of organizations, and any organization that works on early learning issues, whether directly or through advocacy, is able to become an ELAW member and ELAW is free. So if you are interested, or if you know of an organization that would be interested in joining, you can always send them my way, and I can talk with them about the benefits of being part of the coalition. So thank you.
Great. All right. Well, Hannah, thank you very much. I'm sorry Brindle wasn't cooperative. Hannah has a very adorable dog, Brindle, that I was hoping would make an appearance for very selfish reasons. I miss Brindle, and so do my dogs. But thank you so much. And thanks for sharing all that. Keep us posted on the day, the Children's Alliance Advocacy Day, because we'll want to make sure that we share that, and hopefully can send folks to Olympia with you on that very robust legislative agenda. So outstanding. So next, I would like to introduce a couple of folks from Open Doors for Multicultural Families. Moses Perez, who is also a new SVP Seattle partner, joined this year. Moses is the programs manager with Open Doors, and he is joined by his colleague, Peter Musante. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, Peter. So really excited for you both to be here, and I will get you both spotlighted and turn the Zoom over to you.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Good to see all of you. Good to hear from colleagues here, David and Hannah. Wonderful presentations. Very technical, very thorough. I hope we can try to catch up here. We did have a crash kind of crash course type of deal to put a PowerPoint together for this presentation. So we hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate this opportunity. for our organization to be able to share legislative priorities with you all. And yeah, if you have any questions or have any comments towards the end, just let me know. And if I can't answer them today, we definitely will get back to you with that answer. And Peter's going to be sharing the PowerPoint here. I'm going to be taking the first few slides, maybe the first 5, and then Peter will take the last 3. For those of you that do not know, we serve, Peter and I, at Open Doors for Multicultural Families. Again, we're based in Kent, Washington. And we're going to be sharing with you a draft of our legislative priorities. We're still finalizing them and we have to get them approved. And we're also going to go back to staff, make sure we didn't miss any kind of details, things of that nature. And Peter and I specifically work on the advocacy and civic engagement team here at Open Doors. We have a lot of different services that we offer, but of course, one of our arms of services is advocacy for systems change. So we partner at Open Doors, we partner with culturally and linguistically diverse individuals with developmental and or intellectual disabilities and their families. And we use, as the slide says, a more of a cultural brokerage model to help them navigate services for their kiddos, for themselves, and then sometimes even for the adults that we support that have IDD. We provide a lot of different specialized programming from, early childhood development to adult services and youth services and so on and so on. And then, of course, like I said, we also advocate for systems change. I think one of the really cool things to mention about Open Doors, we've only been in existence for about 12 years, and this started on a kitchen table and in the basement of our founder, Ginger Kwan. And she really saw that there was a lot of services lacking to support these individuals that had to deal with both racism and ableism. And so we call this kind of the intersectionality of those individuals and families that we serve. Of course, these are not the only identities that they have to deal with or barriers, poverty, in access to education, housing, things, I can go on, but yeah, mainly they're families and individuals that deal with both ableism and racism. Here in Washington State, for those of you that do not know, there's over 170,000 people living with intellectual and or developmental disabilities. People from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds who have IDDs and their families struggle to navigate systems that are unprepared really to offer language access supports or essential cultural competences and establish services and housing suited exclusively to Western norms. And what that means basically is that, many of the families that we serve that, and first of all, let me say we serve quite a bit of immigrants, refugees, and of course, people of color from different backgrounds. But we see that, especially those families that come from different countries, when you talk to them about advocacy and systems change, it's like a foreign topic to them. So, that's one of the things that we've had to do at Open Doors too, as well, is understand where they're coming from, how did they navigate services in their country, and then try to bridge the gap, right, of knowledge and understanding there. Yeah, next slide, Peter. And so I want to share with you our first priority. I know there's a lot on the screen, but I try to keep it condensed as possible. But I mean, pretty much you could take each one of these bullets and do a one-pager and write a bill for it. But these are 4 that are definitely on our radar. The first one, there's currently a 13.5% special education enrollment cap for the districts, and we're looking to remove that. BIPOC students with IDD and their families are often left out when it comes to educational support and sometimes turned away from their school entirely. And so we're in close relationship right now with OSPI and other IDD stakeholders. We're in favor of removing that cap, but we're also asking OSPI to be more accountable and transparent when it comes to how they're spending the special education dollars. Peter could speak to this. He's really good at, he did a lot of research on this, but when we look at the spending for special education, it's very vague, very high level. And a lot of parents and IDD advocates want a little more transparency there. So we had a pretty high stakes meeting with them maybe about a week ago. A lot of in fact, Arkansas County was with us and a lot of parent advocates. And we just said, hey, we want to advocate for removing that cap and forget, because OSPI is asking for about $1 billion in additional funding from the governor's budget. And we said, hey, we'll advocate for that, but we would like to be part of that co-creation process. We really wish like OSPI would have came to our community 6 months ago and asked us, what is it we want? What is it we think we need for our families? But OSPI was very open to meeting with us, and they are considering the requests that we put forth in that meeting. Of course, school to prison pipeline is very important for our families and the students that we serve at Open Doors, primarily because they're generally the ones most impacted when it comes to this type of practice, including restraint and isolation of children with disabilities. I don't know, Peter, if you have any specifics that you can give there that can bring more context.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of restraint and isolation, the most recent in-person data is from the 2019 to 2020 school year. The gap in time is due to COVID, of course. So there were about 25,000 incidences of restraint and isolation of children with disabilities during the school year. And the children involved were about 6,500. At every grade level, K through 5, so elementary school, middle school, and high school, BIPOC students were heavily overrepresented in terms of who was restrained or isolated. So this is a major issue for us, and more specifically, 95% of students who were restrained and isolated had a disability.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That just kills me, man. Yeah, I just want to share that when I was in 4th grade, I got probably kicked out of my fourth grade class probably over 20 times, and it had nothing to do with me being a bad student. I actually had at least straight A's in math and science, though the classes where the teacher challenged me. And yeah, and the other ones, they just didn't know how to deal with me because I just got bored. I had ADHD, well, undiagnosed time, and it's just unfortunate. But I do thank that teacher, Mr. Wells, who pulled me aside and taught me chess and told me that I could sit still. I just needed to be challenged. So anyways, thank you, Peter, for that. Implementation of language access in public schools is still on our radar. It will be on our radar for many years to come. For those that you that do not know, Open Doors thankfully got a bill passed along with our families last year, HB 1153, and that was to help increase language access in public schools. Many of our parents and families, when they go into their IEP meetings, they're not afforded those language supports, and many times when they ask, if the IEP form, the individual education plan, can be translated in their language for our parents that don't speak or read in English, many times they were denied of that, and that specifically went against several federal laws, the Civil Rights Act, the ADA Act, things of that nature. So thankfully we got that bill passed, but we're actually still trying to advocate for appropriate funding for those state mandates to help out those districts, as well as we ensured that in the bill, that after the bill was passed and it became law, that community would continue to stay involved in the implementation. So a language access advisory committee was set up at OSPI to ensure that our parents and our students are engaged and involved in the approval process for different steps of the implementation of this particular bill. Yep. Okay, so that's K-12 education, and we'll go to priority 2. And I'll give it to Peter here for priority 2 and 3 and the rest of the slides. Thanks, Peter.
All right, thanks, Moses. So priority number 2 is housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our first priority is building a multicultural village. ODMF surveyed our families that we serve and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our surveys represented about 1,200 people. And from those surveys and listening sessions and our own research about the housing available in Washington State, we determined that there was a significant need for affordable, inclusive, and multi-generational housing. The families that we serve tend to be larger than average. The average family we serve is more than 4 people versus the King County average of about 2.45. They tend to be multi-generational and they tend to be lower income. So we wanted to make sure that our families have a space that is safe, has enough physical space for them to remain in their current housing arrangement with extended family, and offers a space, offers a safe outdoor space and other places for them to cohabitate with other members of the community. Number 2 is homelessness and housing insecurity. Improving housing insecurity for people with IDD and their families is a major issue for us. Again, with that survey, about 24% of ODMF families are experiencing housing insecurity, and 81% of our families report foregoing other needs to pay for their housing. So they're spending less on food or on transportation or entertainment or any other assortment of needs to make sure that they keep their housing because they're so overburdened. I'll go on to priority number 3. This is the Developmental Disabilities Administration Services. So number 1 is expanding home and community-based service waivers. Home and community-based service waivers fund services for people with disabilities to remain in their homes in lieu of being placed in an institution. Currently, about 21,000 people in Washington State receive services from one of these waivers. There are several different levels of waivers based on the services you need. And there are approximately 8,000 people who are eligible for services but do not receive them because there's a cap on the number of people that can be served due to arbitrary funding limits. So what we are advocating for is for the Developmental Disabilities Administration to forecast the caseload to increase funding for services to people with IDDs. And what that means is that every year they have to take into consideration how many people they're serving and how many people actually need services. So they'll continually increase funding as the need grows into the future and also consider the current underserved population. And number 2 is compensation for parental caregivers. Children with IDDs depend on extensive daily care performed by their parents or guardians. Currently, only extended family and other caregivers can receive compensation for caregiving. Allowing parents to receive caregiver compensation will increase financial stability and improve care for children with IDDs. Currently, there is a major workforce shortage in terms of caregivers due to the low pay that is allocated for them based on the services offered in the state of Washington. And many families, because they are either unable to obtain caregiver services or don't receive enough hours, these families end up leaving the workforce to make sure that their children have 24-hour care. So it's a major strain on families financially and emotionally to have this additional burden that should be met by the state. So we want to make sure that we can help improve that situation. Okay, and lastly, here's our contact information. If you'd like to reach out to Moses or I with any questions, or if you want to have coffee and chat, we're always happy to do that and just share information and share what we're working on.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Does anyone have any questions or for any of these slides here? Or it could just be anything about Open Doors.
I do, and I would hesitate if any other partners have a question first, but I don't see anyone going off mute. So I have a question, and I think it's for you, Moses, or perhaps Peter, or some of our other speakers. I am disturbed and frankly surprised by the 13.5 by much of this, and the need for why we need legislation and policy change and systems change. But by the 13.5% cap, what does the opposition to that look like? How could they possibly square that with the fundamental right to an inclusive education?
Yeah, thank you, Heather. That's a great question. I'll let Peter take it. He's been doing a lot of research on this.
So first and foremost, they can't.
Mm-hmm.
OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, since 2017 has openly admitted that the cap is not consistent with federal law. In other words, it's unconstitutional.
Right.
The origin of the cap is rather frustrating. The cap resulted from a 1995 study ordered by the legislature, which suggested that many school districts were inflating the number of special needs students in their districts in order to increase the funding that they were receiving. And for, it's been 27 years now since that study. That 13.5% cap that resulted has negatively impacted students, every step of the way. Currently, school districts are either, severely underfunded in their special education needs. They're turning away students. Some districts are shipping students out of state as far away as Massachusetts, literally the opposite side of the country to get services. Currently about 80% of districts rely on local levies to fund essential special education resources. And that is explicitly unconstitutional, coming from the Supreme Court. So it's really a big mess.
Wow. Thank you. Other questions from partners for Moses and Peter?
Not a question, but just a comment about, I think it was your second priority and the focus on a multi-generation household. I think that's incredibly important, and especially with BIPOC communities, there's such a need for that, and I really appreciate you having on that.
Thank you, Letty. I appreciate that. Peter talked about about Open Doors looking to build a multicultural village, and this is really our founder's idea that she's been working on really in her heart for the last probably 4 or 5 years. So we'll share more information as that we're still doing studies and things of that nature, but we're really trying to get a piece of property by the light rail station right by Highline College. So keep your fingers crossed for us. We're just really excited about that one, and hopefully we'll be able to get it and start our fundraising. We've already raised some funds for all the studies and the surveys that we had to do and things of that nature. But yeah, we'll be sharing more information on that. Thank you, Letty. Appreciate it.
And Moses and Peter, same question to you that we've asked other folks. What can SVP partners do? What can we do to help amplify your efforts?
Yeah, I'll go first, Peter. I would just say, once we get these finalized, probably around mid-December, we should have approval from our board and leadership and staff, and the families we serve. And as soon as we get that, we'll share that out with SVP. But I would say, some of the more standard things, talking to your legislators, also any people that in influence on any of the committees, that these issues deal with, and hopefully we'll have those kind of spelled out, making it easier for people to advocate for us. And then when it comes to certain bills that are going to deal with multiple, right? There's going to be multiple bills that are going on. Not us specifically. We're kind of partnering with other organizations, larger coalitions. It's not like the language access bill that we really kind of drove last year, but we'll be sharing information and things of that nature. So you can sign in pro or in opposed, or in opposed to maybe ones that are really going against what we're trying to strive for. So I'll definitely keep you posted, Heather, and SVP posted on that as soon as we get that information ready.
And I think Moses said it all.
Outstanding. Well, we are coming to the end of our time together. So first, I would like to, thank Moses, Peter, Hannah, and David. Thank each of you so much for joining us and sharing. What I am incredibly, I learned a lot, and I'm very motivated to get involved with all of your organizations in these issues in the legislative session. And I know many of our partners will too. It is a holiday week, and so many people were not able to join today that typically do for our Advocacy Affinity group. So we are recording. So I know we've had several requests to get this information. So please know that we'll be sending this around and sharing it with our larger partnership and community. And also, yes, thank you, Letty. Next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, after you have your favorite pie and maybe even a couple others, I don't know, please join us, RSVP, and join us. We are having our first in-person partner meeting. We'll be hearing from 8 of our grantee and community partners. And we'll be at the beautiful community space of our multi-year partner, Choose 180. That's next Tuesday evening from 5 to 7. We're going to have great food and drink as well. So please, the RSVP is in the chat. Please join if you are able, and let us know you're coming so we make sure we have plenty of food and wine and sparkling water for everyone. Again, thank you. Really appreciate all the incredible information and work that you're doing on behalf of Washington State and all of our communities. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.